right, welcome back. Part 3. Now that you've done a little bit of warm-up to get to each, and hopefully it seems a little bit easier, at least on your low back or your shoulders, hopefully, we're going to get into a little bit of specifics. So here we go. So as we get into things like locust, the focus is always on the low back. I would call these tips or tricks, but they're not really tricks. They are simply isolating some work that's going to support your low back, right? Targeting lengthening the spine, and then using the biscuits. So as you work towards traditional locust, we want to bring the arms underneath. Palms can face the floor, or they can face your thighs, but get your elbows a little underneath you, chin comes down, and as you curl the toes, we're going to drive the sits bones to the sky. Watch out for your fingers, shift the weight, and we're going to reach. So driving the sits bones up, squeeze the biscuits, you might reach toes towards your head. One more lift, and come on down. Your crossover space between locust and bow is going to focus somewhere closer to, right, upward facing. We're familiar with lifting from the heart, but that's more of a lift upright. So there's a variation called Bhujangasana, the name which you don't need to remember. But as though you're going to set up for Sphinx, right? Draw the low ribs forward, roll the shoulders back, and lift your gaze a little. You're going to squeeze the belly and squeeze your glutes. Maybe enough so that you're lifting the knees off the mat and then pressing. You want to stay lifted though, so don't sink into the low back lift. Right up through the crown of your head, and then maybe you start to lift your gaze. That's one option. Very similar to your bow, right? If we were to bend the knees, you are mostly there. You reach your head and your toes and come on down. And then Shalambhasana B, your locust variation B, which is similar to your baby cobra. Palms come more towards the low ribs, and instead of lifting from the heels, the focus is lifting also from the heart. Right? Almost towards your bow, pressing up, and exploring some space, but really working the low back, and then release. Bakasana, your traditional frog, which is different than what we normally take, which is closer to your horse pose. So in your traditional frog, we're pressing heel towards the bum. You can take your right forearm parallel to the mat. As you reach behind you, you're actually pressing heel towards your sits bone, just like we do in Virasana, right? Your hero's pose, heel comes a little bit wider. You want to make sure that back knee is in line. Give or take with your hip. So you would try one side. Make sure you're still maintaining that cobra, Sphinx posture, right? Through the spine, lifting up through the crown of your head, lift the gaze. And then maybe we try both feet at the same time. There is no glamorous way to do this. So to your degree, bow will seem a little bit easier than probably either one of those. Now, by the time you get to bridge and wheel, we're also looking to isolate some action. So if you have a little bit of energy left and you've done your warm-up, this shouldn't feel like too much. But otherwise, take your time as you come onto your back. Remember, it's not just legs. We want to press the hips. So often I see people press the hips and the weight is driving into shoulder blades as opposed to the tops of shoulders. So remember, we're going to lift onto the tops of shoulders, which means you had to press your hips nice and high. Lifting from instead of sinking, we want low ribs to lift. You're going to think camel. And we're going to scooch those heels in so we can reach for the ankles. Once you have that, almost like you would do for bow, by the way, a little bit of leverage. So you can pull on the front of your shins for leverage to work the shoulder blades behind you and really drive your hips to the sky. You're basically in your bow, but you might feel a little more supported from the strength of the back side of the body, right? Glutes, hamstrings, press. If you're working on interlacing the hands, you actually want to press your arms down. So a very active posture, again, driving the hips high from your heels, driving yourself into the tops of the shoulders, but that only works if you lift the low ribs as well. Keep in mind you can always work the heels of your palms underneath you. And if you feel nice and supported in your bridge, you might decide to lift a leg. By the time we get to wheel, we're going to start working with the wall. We're going to use some blocks. This is going to offer you a little more range of motion in the shoulders and allow you to activate some strength around that range of motion. It might also provide a deeper stretch. Even though you're coming a little bit out of the posture, it might be a little more accessible. So as you set up blocks, make sure they are the shorter way. They're up against the wall. I know that was a little bit loud in the video, but I don't want you scooting off. So this isn't something that you use blocks freely in the middle of a room somewhere. And if you're a little bit sweaty, definitely bring your mat. You want to leave a little bit of room for your head to come between the blocks so that as you lay back, you want to think about still coming to bridge, right? That's our entryway. That's what's going to work us onto the tops of the shoulders. And eventually, as you reach for the blocks, right here across the top of your hand before where your fingers start, that's where you want on the edge of the blocks. So as you come up, you're going to be fully palmed on the blocks and fingers are going to wrap around. Remember, we are looking for that bridge first. Press on the back of your head, lift your hips, low ribs, find the tops of your shoulders, and from the strength of your legs, right, you're driving hips up and you're going to press. Once you're here, maybe palm press, and you're up. You could do the same thing in reverse. Maybe don't try it just yet. If you go in reverse, it's all about the length. You want to think locus. So you're lifting. Same activation. We want to squeeze the biscuits, drive those hips forward, but our tendency is to sink. So you want to lift from the low ribs, get a little camel action, a little bit of locus action, and we're going to reach up. And the wall is not moving, right? You want to feel supported the whole way. And as I start to bend the knees, keep that. Don't rely on the wall, right? It should be nice and light. Walk the palms down, right? Legs are still very strong. And you find the blocks. And as you tuck the chin, we'll start to come down. So if that all seemed really crazy, we're going to start with baby steps. And don't discount this. I've seen people start crying, but it's not something we tend to do. It's almost the opposite of what we're inclined to do, right? It feels very unsafe. Our throat is open, our heart is open, our hips are open, we're falling backwards. But you're not really falling because those powerful legs still work. So you start really close to the wall. You find that mountain pose. We start to press the hips. We start to lift, low ribs. Roll the shoulders down and reach. The Ujjayi breath is super important. It's going to keep you connected to the belly and your pelvic floor. You want to maintain that as you simply rock back onto heels. Feel your thumbs tap. So don't lose the strength. We're just rocking. Right? You want to be like that 2x4, and that felt okay. So we move a little farther away. And we can still feel safe to reach, rock, reach. Okay, still so far so good, right? Walk a little farther away, reaching up, and starting to press. And now you're starting to feel a little bit of work, right? You got to activate the belly to get back. Now we're going to have to reach a little farther with gaze just up to the sky and back. And you do that until you can basically, give or take, do the same thing. A little baby back bend. And then we start to, remember, it's nice and light. You are still strong in the legs. You're still supporting yourself. Nice and light. Those biscuits are nice and strong. And we start to walk down. You want to be able to come up in the same strength. And so that's what you play with until you get to the point where it feels a little more comfortable. Now that you're all warmed up with wheel, your forearm balance is going to seem a little bit easier. So we are going to use the wall. Make sure, again, it's a solid wall. Doors tend to be a little more solid if it's not your place and you're not sure what they're made of. This is concrete, so I'm feeling pretty confident. You know, you're not trying to kick through the wall. It's just there's a support. You still don't want to ruin your house, or certainly anyone else's house. But we're going to get a little more familiar with kicking up. So very simple. As you take a downward facing dog, you're going to want your fingers about 5 or 6 inches away from the wall, the baseboard. So you have room to, you know, lift your gaze a little and kick your feet. So you're going to take just a shorter down dog. Now some of you are familiar with this. You still want to find the down dog first. It's like a crowbar. If I'm here, that's not going to work. You want straight, strong arms. We want to extend. We're going to take one leg to the sky. You're looking between your thumbs. We're not jumping from the bottom leg so much as it's a little bit of both. Remember, that leg is a crowbar. If I swing it up, it's going to lift the rest of me, or at least my leg, right? So a couple swings, get familiar, maybe come on up. When you come down, it's also one leg at a time, so you're not dropping super heavy. It might be nice to take your heels to the wall, okay? So a little more sturdy. Again, take a shorter downward facing. And you can do this with the dolphin arms. That's also an option because that's where we're headed. You can take the palms with a block between them. I'm just going to prayer palm it for now because really we're isolating, protecting your low back. So as you curl your toes, drive your hips up, find the wall. Remember, we're not relying on the wall. The rest of your body is doing the work, just like wheel. And it's all about driving your butt to the sky. And again, full extension here. If I'm over, I'm in a high plank. It gets a little easier as you reach maybe to the sky, maybe lift your gaze, reach your toes. And again, be gentle as you come down. Now you're ready to get into your forearm balance. You're like, I don't know. Yeah, so you've done all the hard parts. And you might surprise yourself. So if you come at this like you did everything else, fully engaged, kicking, extending to find that little bit of locus, you will surprise yourself, I promise. And you don't need to stay up. If you come up one leg at a time, you just simply come down, okay? There's nowhere for you to go if you're using a wall. So make sure you're doing that. I'm going to use a block because we do have to plant the palms nice and flat. So we frame the block with our thumbs and our pointers. Okay, make sure your elbows are give or take in line with the shoulders, just like you set up for dolphin. So you already did this. We'll do it again here with a little bit of kick. So you take the wall kicks and you take the dolphin on the down dog or the dolphin on the wall. And we kind of put it all together. So remember, as you kick up, you're really trying to set up the locus, long spine. Remember, you're gazing towards your thumbs. And then slowly, right, curl the toes, drive the sits bones, lift the gaze towards the thumbs. One leg comes up. And maybe you come down. Try the other leg. Remember, you're pressing into length. And then you come on down. Hard pose. The name says it all. It's really about that low plank. You're going to take everything you just did, back bend, back bend, back bend, mostly a little bit of locus, mostly that forearm balance. So it's less of a back bend than your wheel, right? So you're thinking locus again. The only problem is that it's in a low plank. So if you're not feeling quite strong, one way to work towards that, and it could be for any reason, maybe because you've done all of these back bends, maybe you did video 1, 2, and you're on 3, really doesn't matter. I've worked with a shoulder injury for probably 20 years, but more acutely in the last 3 years, so wheel is actually typically not something I take, and it's something that requires a lot of focus and strength to get to. Not even in just one practice, but typically over the course of a couple of weeks if that's my intention. So be kind to your body. We're always looking to use these poses to support the body, not the other way around. You're going to take your fingertips. This is to isolate a little strength in your low plank, right in front of those blocks, so that as you set up your high plank, I practice coming just to low. You can rest the shoulders on the blocks, and if you hang out here a few breaths, you're going to get that feeling, right? You're pressing from the palms. Notice how the elbows are tucked in, and you can tuck them a little underneath you and hang out here. This is basically your setup for what you're going to do. Okay? So maybe check that out, and then we'll get right to it. So you're going to take that short down dog one more time. Still looking between the thumbs, not thinking too much about it. Drive your sits bones up and back. Right, as you come into that low plank, sits bones have to stay high. Right, we're trying to get the legs up, so your biscuits have to be up. Low plank, chin comes down. And then you can come down too. Nice work. So if you made it this far, I'm going to tell you one of the key isolations isn't necessarily the backside of your body. It's not your biscuits. It's not extending the spine. It's also working where we are most weak. Weak might not be the best way to describe it, but we really don't lift from the front line of our bodies a lot. It's not a familiar space. I can't think of any place in our day where we do this particular kind of movement. So if you have a chance in your practice, whether before you get started or just miscellaneously throughout your day, I would offer these couple of lifting postures, focusing on the front line of the body. And over time, I guarantee you get into everything. All right, so no rush. It's a lifetime practice for a reason. So reverse table, Purvottanasana, Virasana to camel, press the hips, and Uttana Padasana, which is very similar to your fish, except we're lifting from the heart, maybe lifting from the legs. So I hope you guys had a little bit of fun. Remember, you have access to these videos at any point, whenever you need them, whenever you need a little pick-me-up or a little bit of fun. As you can tell, I am dripping with sweat, even just after this little series. So it is a tremendous amount of work, so give yourself credit for even just trying. And then you got to remember that we only find balance by being a little out of balance. So we have to put ourselves in those spaces where, you know, we're falling in, we're falling out in order to work the strength that's going to get us there. So have a little bit of fun and keep whacking at this. I'll see you soon. Toodles.